welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am your host, James Just, and with me today is author extraordinaire, Mr. John Cameron. John, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right.
I'm doing all right. It's been a nice...
Better than all right. Better than all right. I live in a fantastic country.
Did you have a good Valentine's Day yesterday?
We don't celebrate Valentine's Day in my house, so it was very inexpensive.
Mine too. We have a very quiet Valentine's Day in my house, and I hope everybody had a nice Valentine's Day.
I think I got up and said Happy Valentine's, and my wife said, "Oh, is it Valentine's Day?" Yeah.
I think there may be many, many men out there, John, who are jealous of you right now. I suspect.
As well you should be if you ever met my wife.
Hey, she should watch your show tonight. All right, so something we are jealous of is Mr. Javier Milei. He managed to get at least about half of his reform package through the legislature. He had asked for, what, 54?
In Argentina. We should let
in
people...
Argentina. Javier Milei in Argentina.
Yeah.
I assume that our viewers have heard us go on about Javier Milei.
Well, maybe we have, you know, it looks like the system's saying we've got hundreds of new viewers tonight, so...
Hey.
The system's my imagination, by the way.
So he managed to get at least a chunk of his reform packages through. He wanted 54, I think it was 54 or 44 of the state-owned businesses to be privatized. He got 27.
Yeah.
And he was able to maintain some of those departments he wanted axed.
Yeah.
He was able to keep them axed.
Yeah.
So, you know, we all knew he wasn't going to be able to come in and get everything done he wanted all at once. But this is like some good progress, and it shows that he still has support from the people. So this shows that you can actually run on being a libertarian if people are unhappy enough.
Yeah.
I think it's what...
So in that case, a libertarian should be elected president last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we just haven't felt enough pain here in the United States yet, John. I mean, Argentina had to go through a lot of pain before they were willing to accept someone like Javier Milei.
Yeah.
And we may have to go through the same, unfortunately, it may be this the way it goes.
We're going to be talking bread lines and empty bank accounts. Basically, that's what happened there. 200%
of inflation, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you actually looked at accurate inflation numbers, it might have been close to that. Well, that's a whole different.
That's a whole different. Yeah. Well, my grocery bill has more than doubled, so you know it's insane.
I can pick out I buy protein. I take protein supplements, and over the last 4 years, it's gone from $33 for a big tub of this special protein powder I like to use to almost $100 in 4 years.
Yeah, it's the inflation.
Anyway, back to Milei. I want to talk about something.
Well, this is the cost of printing money, and the cost of this. We're talking about the cost of printing money, the cost of an over-exuberant government, and Milei is we're talking about solutions to that problem, and it actually is. You have no choice but to actually cut the monster, right? That's the only way you're going to do it.
Chop the tentacles off the monster. They're going back so quickly, though. Yeah, he's the Senate. They have a House and a Senate. It's kind of the same way we do. Probably not as corrupt as ours, but kicked it back because he snuck in a little like emergency powers thing that runs counter to their Constitution, which almost everybody seems to sneak in, even if they are libertarians. And we knew that the Senate was going to be in Argentina a tougher nut to crack than the House. You know, like the House here is, that's why taxes, at least in the U.S., anything that's a tax has to start in the House, because our founders realized that the House is closer to the people. Their terms are shorter. They're more responsive to the people, whereas the Senate, they're more entrenched. Their terms are longer. They're not as responsive to the people. And so he's running into the same kind of thing there. But I think once people see that even getting rid of some of those state organizations and privatizing many businesses that were basically nationalized.
And getting the bureaucracy off their back. Yeah. Let's not forget that a lot of what he did is just get the bureaucracy off people's backs.
Well, one of my least favorite people did that here, and is now, basically he's a political criminal. Trump. He eliminated regulations that were costing this country $500 billion. And as soon as he was out of office, the other guy, the cadaver president, reinstated them all. So
Well, that's the problem with executive orders, right? Because
Yeah,
they can just be undone.
Yeah.
And so unless you actually pass laws through the legislature, through Congress, you know, these changes are temporary at best. And so the relief, you may never even get the relief because this bureaucracy can slow walk the change.
Slow walk the change. They can, unlike you or I, they don't go to jail for lying, cheating, and stealing. They get their wrists slapped. Yeah.
Oh, they don't even get the wrist slap. They get a promotion if the next guy likes what they did.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's how that works. That's how that works. Well, let's talk a minute about getting promotions for doing something unethical. Unions in what was it, Texas? I forget.
Government unions.
Government unions.
No, not private unions.
Not private
Government
unions. We're talking public employee unions have been. They get what they call. I forget the phrase.
I forget the phrase too. It's basically undertime. They go on leave from their job, yet the taxpayers still pay them their government wage while they do work for the union. And in many cases, that work for the union is in essence lobbying for political candidates and for increased wages and benefits for the union. And while they're doing that, and I'm sure it's happening in California.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The taxpayers are paying for them to steal their money.
Yes, the unions call it release time, by the way.
Release time.
I looked it up, release time. So where they get paid by the taxpayer to go out and do union work. And why isn't the union paying for them to do that instead of taxpayers? Why isn't the union hiring people to do that? Are they taking away good, hardworking jobs from other bureaucrats that could be working for the union? Good jobs for these people, but
Well,
instead...
people in the private sector that could do that for them.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid, you know?
So
No, it's theft basically, and it's I don't think there's a law in the books, even in Texas, that says that you know, people can get paid by the government to go work for somebody else.
well, this is
I
what
doubt very
happens
seriously if that's legal.
in these union. It's in the union contracts.
Yeah.
They sneak it into these contracts, and of course, these contracts are often signed by people who've gotten a lot of money from the unions.
I'm shocked by that.
And-
That kind of thing happens?
Oh yeah, you know how the unions, they get all mad when other people's money's, you know, accomplishes something in government, but when their money accomplishes something in government, it's not, no, somehow it's never the money in government's never a problem.
Oh,
It's
no.
only other people's money that's a problem in
Like
government.
Is it the NEA, National Association of Education, National Education?
National Education Association, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of these things
Which is government funded, and then they turn around and give that money
to the politicians.
to Democratic politicians.
Yeah.
They give like 1% of it to Republicans, the rest of
Oh,
it
if
goes,
that.
or 2%, yeah.
If that,
The
if
rest
that.
of it goes to Democratic politicians.
Yeah,
Yeah, imagine that.
imagine that.
Yeah.
So it is, it's the audacity of it, really, that they've been able to kind of get away with this. People just kind of look the other way. Well, how would somebody who works at, you know, McDonald's or Burger King essentially have to pay taxes so someone can go off and do union work? When the union, they should either be volunteering, like, you know, many of us libertarians, we volunteer a lot of our time to go out and work for our cause, or why don't they use some of that money that they get from their union members, those dues, and use it to legitimately pay people to do this kind of
Or
thing.
why don't we just make government unions illegal, like FDR thought they should be? And he was the great socialist, and he thought that there was such a conflict of interest between government unions and citizens that they shouldn't even be allowed to exist. And that's FDR, folks.
Well, what's funny is those same bureaucrats who want the union to protect them from the government will tell us we, as individuals, don't need anything to protect them from them, which they are the government. So it's the bureaucrats are the government. And so if they need an organization to protect them from the government, then don't the rest of us need protection from the government? Or are they the battle angels,
Oh,
angels
they're going
of
to
our
do that
nature?
for us.
Oh, yeah,
They'll
do it.
take care of us.
All right, we're going to move on to Mr. Richard Fields. He has some interesting, maybe I should slow down talking tonight, John. Mr. Richard Fields
Maybe you
has some
should.
interesting information about inflation, a perspective on inflation that I think we should.
I want to hear this, because Mr. Fields is a bright man.
All right, so let's hear what we got from Mr. Fields today.
Because he was around to see the glacial times. He was reporting from his personal experience.
from his farm that was under
Under an ice sheet.
under an ice sheet 10,000 years ago.
It's not that old. Yet.
Yeah.
Kind this is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released its latest inflation guesstimate earlier this week. The year-over-year number, which bears little resemblance to your grocery bill or other living expenses, was 3.1%. That's lower than last month's 3.4%. So the financial markets should jump joyously, right? But wait, the day after the announcement, the stock market went down and interest rates went up. What? Isn't lower inflation supposed to be good for business? And shouldn't lower inflation mean a lower inflation premium on borrowing money? Well, in today's funhouse mirror financial markets, what you see is not what you get. Everything turns on expectations of where the Fed, which administers price controls on the price of money, otherwise known as interest rates, is going to ordain interest rates to be next. Stock market investors want lower rates. That way they can borrow to buy stocks more cheaply. Businesses can borrow to finance inventories more cheaply, and so forth. But if inflation is not going to the Fed's target of 2% quickly enough, the tea leaf readers at the Fed will delay lowering rates because higher rates mean a slower growing economy and less inflation. Are you following so far? If you don't, no worries. According to Credit Suisse, the top 10% of people own 82% of all the investment wealth globally. It's a small club and we're probably not in it. All of this begs the question of what is magical about 2% inflation. After all, it means that your money loses half its value in only 35 years, meaning you will have about half as much money to retire on as you may have been expecting. To understand the magic requires understanding that inflation, accurately defined, is simply the increase in the amount of money available to buy goods and services, expressed as an annual percentage gain. It's an increase in money with no corresponding increase in what that money buys. More money, the same amount of stuff to buy, prices go up. Simple supply and demand. The biggest chunk of all the trillions of new money the Fed has created over the last several decades is borrowed by the federal government to cover the difference between government spending and taxes collected. Another chunk is borrowed by businesses to fund operations and by the wealthy to speculate in the stock and bond markets. What's left is lent to consumers paying about 23% interest with little hope of ever getting out of debt. In 2020, the Fed increased its assets, that is, it created new money out of thin air by $3.16 trillion with a T. The federal government borrowed even more, $4.56 trillion. They got the rest from other investors, other countries, businesses, and individuals. The point is 69% of the budget deficit in 2020 came from newly minted Fed funny money. That's what led to 9% inflation. People notice 9%. They tend not to notice 2%. That's why the Fed tries to keep inflation at 2%. It functions as a 2% sales tax without the government having to admit it. So remember that the next time some lying politician tries to tell you inflation is caused by Kellogg's shrinking its package of corn flakes. Inflation is never, ever anything other than a sneaky, indirect sales tax. I'm Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. See you next week.
We have mentioned this many, many times, and we're going to be like broken records on this thing, that printing money creates inflation. Inflation is a monetary policy problem, not a economics problem.
Not according to Mr. Krugman, who won a Nobel Prize as an economist.
Yeah, well, the Nobel Prize is only worth the check that these people cash. It's worth nothing else to you.
Well, and I chat with people about the Nobel Prize, and basically now it's lefties giving prizes to lefties for being lefties.
Yeah.
That's it.
When Obama won for essentially winning the election, that's when you knew it would.
Oh, you knew that way before.
Yeah.
I mean, if any other president would have got North and South Korea to talk, other than the crazy orange-haired man or crazy orange-skinned man, whatever they call him.
I'm not going to say he earned a thing. It's just some others haven't.
Well, no, I mean, if any other president, anybody on the planet would have done that, they would have won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
I think if Mussolini would have done it, he would have won a Nobel Prize. So it's lefties giving awards to lefties for being lefties.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it's gone on to.
Yeah.
Talk about another lefty. We've got, like 13 minutes, John, so we're going to run through some of these.
All right. Good.
Governor Newsom is trying to act presidential in trying to solve the problems down in Oakland. And he got really mad at the Oakland's mayor the other night for not actually applying for some state grant money. Yeah, so he's rushing in some extra resources, which CHP officers and state some of the stuff that these people who have stated for literally 2 decades they're against. Now all of a sudden they're for this. You know, 2 months ago there's no crime problem, but now all of a sudden they're rushing in resources to solve a crime problem. When are we going to actually hold these people accountable for just straight up lying to us?
How about never? Never. I think politicians are legally allowed to lie to us, whereas we can't lie to them. We lie to them, we go to jail. They lie to us, they retire with crazy bonuses and go on the speaker circuit and go on, become boards of directors of companies that have, you know, they've written favorable legislation for. But it's crazy because Oakland, was it the only In-N-Out burger that's ever closed? Was that in Oakland or San Francisco? Oakland.
It was in the Bay Area. I don't remember exactly where it was.
Their Clorox, which is headquartered in Oakland, basically has people accompany their employees to parking lots, security people, so they don't fear for their lives. I'm sure Kaiser's doing it as well because I think they're headquartered in Oakland. I'm not sure.
Didn't the state agencies tell all their workers not to come to the office because it's too dangerous where the building is?
Pretty much.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they had told us for a long time that this wasn't happening, for years, that this what everybody can see with their eyes wasn't happening.
1984.
It is
Teach
crazy.
you not to trust your eyes or ears, trust us.
Now, someone else
It's
we can't
almost a
trust.
direct quote.
Yeah, someone else we can't trust is Biden. Biden was bragging about defying the Supreme Court on the student loans, on his student loan debacle.
So they told me not to do it, but I found a way around them. He said that in a speech. They
someone
told
wrote
me
that.
I couldn't do it.
Someone wrote that down and said, we should say this.
We should say this, or else he just, you know. Who
Well,
knows?
he can't put a thing together without someone writing it down for him. So someone wrote that for him to say. But these are the people who talk about our Constitution. These are the people who talk about protecting democracy. These are the people who talk about the rule of law when it suits them. But yet, when it doesn't suit them, they don't care about the Constitution. When it comes to, as we talk about next week, when it comes to gun rights, they don't care about the Constitution. When it comes to free speech, they don't care about the Constitution. When it comes to staying in the lane of government, they don't care about the Constitution. What do we do here, John?
I think third party, and I'm not saying vote for Kennedy because he's a lunatic on some things, the economy being one of them. And since we want people to get out of the way of the economy, we don't want him in power. And I don't know. I think if you look at what Americans want, if you take a poll, what they want basically is very close to what libertarians want. About 75% of people. If you remove the label libertarian from it, they want much more personal freedom, much less invasive government, way fewer rules and regulations. They want to live and let live. They want people to protect their stuff. They want to be able to protect their stuff. But until we get the duopoly out of the way and actually give the American people what they want, this kind of crazy stuff's going to happen. And just to say, if, what's his name, the Trumpster, the trumpeter, if he would have gone on and made a speech about the Supreme Court told me not to do this, but I found a way to get around them, they would have demanded that he be impeached for making that statement.
Yeah,
So we've got a little bit of double standards going on here.
and I just want whoever votes, just hold people to your actual standards, to your stated standards. Whatever your standards happen to be, hold people to them.
I agree, and let's have an amendment to the Constitution, real simple, that people who work for the government aren't held to a lower standard than you or I. They're held to a higher standard, and then maybe we'd have way fewer people in government.
Well, the rule of law is supposed to apply to the government as much as it applies to us.
Doesn't.
But
You know, qualified immunity, DAs have absolute immunity, and it doesn't. Okay, I'll negotiate with you. We'll do it your way. We'll say that the exact same rules of law apply to people who work in governments and government agencies as do to people who work in the private sector. I'll be happy with that.
yeah.
Deal? We'll just shake on
Yeah,
it
I'll
now.
shake on that anytime you want,
Yeah.
John. So that's something else to shake on. Dartmouth is becoming the first Ivy League university to reinstate standardized testing, the SAT. Well, and it's because what they found out is removing the SAT actually makes it harder for minority and underprivileged students to get that seat in because they can't prove that they are able to. You can't take the standardized test and say, well, you came from a low-performing school, so the only way you're going to get into someplace like Dartmouth is to score really, really well on these standardized tests. And you know, when you talk about, you know, you got grade inflation and all kinds of other issues that standardized testing helps mitigate. It doesn't solve it, but it helps mitigate.
There are two great predictors for academic excellence going forward. That's past academic excellence. In other words, you've got great grades in school, but you're talking about grade inflation. If you're in a horrible school, because I think even California has top 3% or 5% graduates of any school are guaranteed to get into the university system. But if everybody in your high school is an idiot and you're in the top 3% or 4% of idiots, then you get into a rigorous field of study without the standardized testing showing that you have a comprehension of basic mathematics in the English language, then you're going to fail. And that's what they're finding, that without standardized testing, because of grade inflation, then people will come in and take courses and fail because they don't have the academic rigor to accomplish them.
One of the things that has astounded me is how many of our universities, not community colleges, our universities actually give remedial classes, remedial English classes, remedial math classes. If you have to take a remedial class, you shouldn't be in university.
No.
I mean, and that's...
It's like 60+% of current students in the university system, I think, in California, aren't at the basic level of education that they need to be in that university system.
And they're paying a ton of, I almost had to censor myself there. They're paying a literal ton of money to get undereducated.
A boatload of money. A boatload. Yes, they are. Well, they're not paying it because if...
Plus interest, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, our president's going to make sure they don't have to repay that.
But they're going to have to, this is the thing that they don't understand. They're going to be paying that loan for the rest of their lives one way or the other. They're either going to be repaying it in taxes to the federal government so they can pay off the loans that you took from the government.
Or if the government prints the money to pay it off, they're going to be paying the inflation tax, which is, the inflation is the cruelest regressive tax there is. It's the cruelest regressive tax there is.
It's the poor, the hardest, the lowest man on the totem pole. As
Always does.
we've said time and time again, the end consumer pays all costs. And what's inflation hurt the most? The end consumer. All right, John, we got 4.5 minutes. State workers are complaining
I want
that
a piece of this one.
that they have to return to the office. You know, they're trying to say it would cost more than money. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. You know, a lot of people can say that they are more productive at home. You know, well, you as an individual may be more productive at home, but your team is not more productive when everybody's at home. Collaboration requires togetherness. You can't collaborate.
Handshake, looking somebody in the eye, body language.
Conversations go much faster. What's a 10-minute email to write can be a 2-minute conversation.
It could be a 30-second conversation. And besides that, Professor Morabian, 57% of communication that builds trust. I think 50+% is body language, 30+% is tone, 8% is the actual word. So if you're constantly communicating by email or text, you're basically leaving out 92% of the power of conversation. But let's talk about the fact that when the I think it was the Sacramento Bee or MSN or somebody, when they had conversations with the state workers, they said, well, I'm going to have to have childcare now. And I'm thinking, well, hold on. My tax dollars are paying you to work, but instead of working, you're doing childcare. So that means that a third of your time maybe is spent doing that. I'm paying you to do that. I wasn't aware of this. That means we can just fire a third of those people because they're not doing anything.
Yeah, I think studies have actually shown that people are not actually more productive at home for a lot of reasons. Well, and there's some people are, but those are the people who will be productive anywhere.
Yeah.
The people who can be productive at home are the people who are productive anywhere. Or the people who are self-starters, self-motivated, where they don't need someone watching over them. Those are the people who should be freelancers and not actually employees.
Well, and those
probably.
people are the ones that when they're in meetings with people, whether they're in a leadership position in the meeting or management position or not, they're the ones that come up with the ideas. They're the ones that make the environment a wonderful place to work. They're the natural leaders. Just by their example, that drag everybody else along with them. And when you're sitting in your house helping your kid study homework instead of the job taxpayers are doing for you, that's not happening.
Yeah, well, you're saying you're working more at night than you're, yeah, I don't buy it. We've got like a minute and a half, John. So who benefits from digital everything, John?
I have no idea. I think basically the powers that we let be, the government agencies that want to track everything, it certainly isn't humanity as a whole interacting in the way that human animals need to interact. It's basically, I just think it's our overlords. They're the ones that benefit by all of this.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of people trying to sell me soap or gadgets or the marketers. I'm afraid of the government, and actually, as we've talked about here before this week or next week, about how activists have gotten control of things. And those activists having control, having access to everything, being able to turn
financial records,
being able to turn your electricity on and off, being able to turn your credit cards on and off. Yeah, all that is kind of scary. You know, we talk more and more about how the government and the bureaucracy enter into our lives, and we should not. We should be very wary. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, John. Thank you for joining me, John. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank everybody inside for working very hard. Have a good week, and please remember to love everybody, and good night.
Love conquers almost everything. Well spoken. Almost.
Almost.
It hasn't gotten the IRS yet, but
one of these days.
One of these days.
One of these days.